Hey, good afternoon. Almost 2 years ago, soon after the COVID lockdown began, I began to post regular videos based on the Foundation's devotional book. At that time, I believed that it would be a good way to stay connected while we as a church were forced to physically distance ourselves from one another. My original thought was that I'd stop the videos once COVID died down and everything sort of went back to normal. Well, the more things change, the more that they stay the same. So here we are again at the beginning of 2022, and COVID cases are spiking again. As it turns out, videos are still a good way to communicate and encourage each other, and even draw us together as a faith family. Now, I'm not much for New Year's resolutions, but one of my goals for this year is to once again post some video content on a weekly basis. And my thought for this year is that I would work through the book of Genesis, doing one chapter per week. Now, this works out pretty well. Genesis has 50 chapters. There's 52 weeks in the year, so it'll pretty much take all year. Also, as we begin, please take a moment to read Genesis chapter 1. Ultimately, it is the Word of God that gives life, not whatever I have to say about it. Plus, my thoughts and comments will make much more sense after you've read the text than before. The other thing that I would say right off the bat is that I will not be delving into the variety of theories regarding the date and or time of creation. Those are valuable questions, but they are also peripheral, I think, to the real message of Genesis chapter 1. In other words, I do not believe that that is what this text is primarily about. So with that, let me share a few observations from Genesis chapter 1. In 1998, the British rock band The Verve released a single entitled Bittersweet Symphony in the United States. The song was a hit, and as a side note, it became sort of a running joke between me and my younger brother. Anyway, the song made it to number 12 on the Billboard charts that year. There was just one problem. The dominant melody that runs throughout the entire song was borrowed from an orchestral version of another Rolling Stones song. The Verve had tried, but ultimately failed to adequately obtain permission for its use. Controversy soon followed. The Verve ended up being sued and ultimately being forced to give up the rights and profits of the song. It was their one big hit, and they made absolutely nothing from it. Now, the point of all of this is that we generally ascribe the rights and privileges of ownership to the person or persons who created that something. Whether it's an idea, a speech, a poem, a design, or in this case, a song, all belong to the entity that created them, to the one who gave it life, if you will. Now apply that truth to Genesis chapter 1. It says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God designed it, created it, formed it, filled it, and set it in motion. So to whom does the earth belong? Well, the answer in this case is God. This even is the Bible's own commentary on this chapter. Jeremiah, Isaiah, the Psalms, Paul, and Acts chapter 17 all testify to this reality. So what does it mean? Well, it means that as Psalm 24:1 tells us that the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and all who dwell therein. This means that God has a sort of divine prerogative when it comes to the world and even to our lives. It means that God is the one who determines what order and beauty and morality are. It is God who says what is good, and that good is a declaration, is a theme of this chapter. This is why God can assign humanity work, why he can instruct on right and wrong, why he's justified even in his judgment. Genesis chapter 1 sets the stage for the rest of the Bible, for it provides the foundational understanding of who God is in relation to us. For all of creation is designed to live in awe and obedience to God. This reality comes up in the New Testament as well. Consider 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 19 through 20. There, Paul concludes his instruction on the biblical sexual ethic with these words. He says, quote, "You are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body," end quote. Christians are doubly not their own. Not only are they part of God's creation, but they have also been redeemed by the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. That's why Paul often refers to himself as a slave that belongs to Jesus, a slave who is meant to bring glory to his master. Now look, in truth, this would be terrifying if it were not for God's character, a character that we glimpse even in this opening chapter of the Bible. God creates as an expression of his love and his joy. He creates out of a desire to share himself with his creation, and he creates to display his ultimate glory. And this is good. Even in this text, we see that God intentionally brings order out of chaos, that he arranges the universe so that it acts in harmony, so that he creates humanity in his image. All we have to do is look around and we see the goodness of God on full display. Let me leave you with one more thing, and this is even rather haunting from this passage. When everything works and acts as God created it, it is very good. And that's not the faint praise of a grudging observer. That's God's own description. Therein lies the application, or at least part of the application for us. Not only will we ultimately live and surrender to the God of the universe, but the intentional deference to God now is good. It will bring about our good, and it is for our benefit. So as you think about Genesis chapter 1, acknowledge God's sovereignty and live for him.